Thank you for coming to the Awaken Life podcast. I'm your host, Scott Landis. How can you live an absolutely fulfilling and purpose-filled life, maintain a passionate, intimate relationship, all while raising kids and growing multiple streams of income? That's the big question we seek to answer on this podcast by interviewing people who are already doing it. One thing we know for sure is it takes a community to do it well. So thank you for being a part of the Awaken Life community. I'm looking forward to growing with you, and on to the episode. Welcome to the Awaken Life podcast with Scott Landis, and today my guest is David VanBeenen, Coach Dave, and he's battled through incredible hardships, grappled with despair, and even faced moments when life seemed unbearable. But today he's stronger, wiser, and more determined than ever before. The journey from depths of hopelessness to renewed purpose requires you to confront your own demons, face the scars of the past, and reevaluate the core values that define who you are. In Dave's darkest moments, he contemplated the unthinkable. He went from a very successful, driven man with purpose, goals, and strong vision to losing everything financially, personally, and faced a legal battle that altered the course of his life. But it was a spark of resilience and grit that urged him to search for a better way forward. And now Dave is a story of hope, not only within himself, but for others as well. Now his mission is to help men who are navigating the treacherous terrain of struggle and hardship, to provide them with tools, guidance, and support they need to overcome obstacles, transform their mindset, move through adversity, and create a life of fulfillment and success. And that is right up the alley of Awaken Life podcast. Dave, thanks for joining me on the show.
My pleasure. Thanks so much for having me.
Yeah, thanks for being here. So, I'll start with, we met, we were kind of office mates, met in the same office building, but we were in the same community, in the West Lynn community, and you're pretty plugged into the community. So what's your story of being a part of West Lynn?
So, as I'll kind of go on to share a little bit of how my story landed us in West Lynn. My family and I have been here for almost 15 years now. We've kind of always been in the metro area, at least most of our adult life. And we ended up coming to West Lynn just by sheer luck, for lack of a better term. And the community very accepting. It's been a very great place for our family to be, and we've brought through 2 kids through the school system, and then I'm heavily involved in youth basketball, and been on high school staff here as far as sports is concerned for several years as well. So it's we're pretty entrenched in West Lynn, for lack of a better term, and run our businesses and everything right out of here as well.
Right. So you're in West Lynn high school basketball, right?
Yeah. So I was on the men's staff for several years, and this year is the first year that I'm actually going to take the leap and join the women's staff for basketball, which I'm really looking forward to. My wife has been trying to tell me for years that I would love to coach girls basketball, and I did it through the summer, and I had a great time with it. So I'm really looking forward to the basketball season and working with the girls. It's a different aspect of the game, and I'm really looking forward to it.
Awesome. And you have 2 kids. They already graduated from high school?
Yeah, I have a daughter who's 23, and my son is 20.
Okay. So does that mean you're in the empty nest phase?
Just about. They come around quite a bit still. My son actually was in California at a junior college last year playing basketball, and he decided to come home where he's going to play a little more locally at our college here. And then he, unfortunately, he actually had another injury setback about a month ago, so he's going to end up missing this year. But he's at home, and then my daughter's kind of a part-time at home. Not quite empty nest yet. Yeah. We try to keep them around as long as we can. Yeah.
It's easy to bribe them with food and, come over for dinner, that kind of stuff.
Yes. Filling up the gas tank, those kind of things. They don't want to leave quite yet.
Yeah. Nice. And how long have you guys been married?
So 25 years. Our 25-year anniversary was actually just on July 18th. So
Wow.
yeah, we got married young. My wife and I were 22 years old, and we followed with a couple of kids soon after. And yeah, here we are, kind of turning the page in our lives, I guess, and see what
Mhm.
the next 25 years brings.
Yeah, awesome. And so did you guys meet in high school, or how'd you meet?
We did. Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah. So
nice.
I grew up originally like in the Los Angeles area, and
Mhm.
I moved up to Springfield, Oregon, of all places, from Los Angeles at 16 years old. And I met my wife there in high school, and we started going out. I actually went to Florida to go to college, so we spent a couple years apart. But after that, we got married, and the rest is history.
Yeah, I heard a rumor that that is where um, the Homer and Bart Springfield is
It
from. Can
is,
you
yeah.
confirm or deny that? I know that
So
it's
from what
controversial,
I
but
have, yeah, I've been out of there for a long time, but what I did hear is that they finally actually acknowledged that it was Springfield, Oregon, that the town was dedicated after. They
wow.
finally did acknowledge that. Yeah.
You've heard it here, folks. It's
Yeah.
confirmed.
It's official.
Yeah. Cool. Okay, so tell me about your professional life. So you got married young, started having babies at an early age, and then what was the professional life like?
So initially out of college, my wife and I moved to Atlanta, Georgia, and we started working for like a property management firm who bought big multi-unit type of real estate. And after a pretty short-lived experience there, it didn't work out well, so we moved back to the Portland area. And coming from the Los Angeles area and going back to Springfield, Eugene was just not kind of. I'm more of a bigger city type of guy, so we now live, Portland and Westland, and we've been in Vancouver and Clackamas, which are all the Portland suburbs.
Mhm.
And so after coming back from Atlanta, I got into finance, and I began as a stockbroker and a financial advisor. And I had that career for probably a good 10 years. And there were some things that happened in my life we'll talk about a little later that kind of changed my trajectory from there. I started to get into real estate investing, and did that for a little while. The big market correction we had kind of threw me for a loop. And from that point on and several other events, I ended up on the construction side. So doing some real estate investing, and flipping of houses and things like that. And then kind of getting back on our feet after the fall, kind of construction and that side of the business I knew. So we kind of stumbled into a construction company, and we've had that going now for about 12 years. And then I also do, coaching, of course, and I work with not only, on the basketball court or on the field, but I do some mental performance training for athletes. And then I also work for, helping men through some adversity and struggles and things like that.
Right. So you've been so you played basketball in college, right?
I did. Yeah. I
Wow.
played at a small school called Warner University, which was right smack dab in the middle of Florida. It was a great experience, met some great friends there, played for a great coach and had a great experience. I was a real successful small college player.
Mhm.
And my experience, especially based on the couple of years I was there, really kind of has always driven me to kind of give back to the sport. So that's why I've been involved, really since I got out of college, of really being actively involved in the sport of basketball, trying to give back everything I can, for the youth and high school. And I even spent some time coaching college basketball too.
Nice. All right. So you've been kind of involved in basketball the whole time, coaching. And then where did you start to work with adults and men? As you said, where did that start? Because the coaching career has kind of been there the whole time in
Yep.
sports, and then yeah, where did it start to shift?
Well, kind of backing up a little bit, I'll share a little bit about how I kind of ended up on this path, if you will, as far as coaching and trying to help others in their personal life, kind of away from sports. Like I had mentioned, I was in finance for most of my early career, and I was extremely successful. Made a lot of money. I really loved my job and the people I was working with. But there was always this itch inside of me to be an entrepreneur. As a kid, like movies like Wall Street and things like that. I mean, I was, 10, 11, 12 years old watching movies like that. And that was kind of always my goal, to be independently wealthy and be an entrepreneur and kind of run my own business. So as time in the finance world started to tick by, that itch became a little more and a little more and a little more. And I decided that I had a really good chunk of money saved up. And I'm like, you know what, I'm going to break away from this, and I'm going to go start my own company. And I'm going to start, this was at the time where real estate was booming, and you had to basically just have a pulse to make a bunch of money in real estate. And so I thought, gosh, I can go do this. So I left a very good, secure position that I was very good at. And I said, let's go do this. So initially when I left, after some thinking about it and a little trepidation, things started going very well for me, on the entrepreneur side. I was having a good time and money was coming in. I was working I was working quite hard because, for you and most of your listeners, when you're self-employed, there's not a lot of time off. You always find yourself working. And if you're not working, you're thinking. So you're never really off, if you will. And things were going really good. My family and I, we were in a good position, and we moved into a nice big house on the hill and a couple little kids running around, and it was really great.
About how old were the kids at that time?
The kids at this time, this must have been mid-2s. So they were probably like 8 and 5, roughly. Okay. 8 and 6. And
age.
Everything is going really, really well. And
so a quick sidebar here. So in your this scenario tends to have at least some questions from the spouse, okay, got this nice, secure, like everything's great. And you're like, oh, I'm going to go follow my dreams, start a business. Forget this perfect, scenario. Was there any like trepidation from the wife there? Like what was the conversations?
Of course. And I will be the first to admit, even some to this day, but more so back then, okay. I am not the greatest communicator when it comes to life changes with my wife. I process for months at a time. And then finally, when it's like, okay, I'm ready, then I just kind of lay it on my wife, unfortunately. Like, hey, guess what? I'm leaving, and she definitely was a little trepid because, basically, especially when I was working in finance, our life really shifted from, we both grew up very blue collar families and kind of, and so all of a sudden, as the success kicked off in the finance world, we were upper middle class, we were driving a BMW and really, really having some good things happen. So, but the thing that both my wife and at that point of our lives, it almost had seemed that everything I had touched kind of turned to gold. In athletics and professionally. And I had looked back at, I'm 30 years old or something at the time. And looking back, I had never really experienced failure or gone through any real major setback in life. And so my wife was extremely supportive, and she had, after a couple of days of discussion, she had the full faith that, hey, I see kind of the path you've got going. And I was, at the time more confident, almost arrogant, like, of course, everything's going to work out great if I go jump and start this new venture. So okay. I'm sure I did the best I could to sell her hard on it. And she bought right in and supported it like she does with everything. Mm-hmm. And off we went.
Mm-hmm. Okay, good. So you kind of, at this stage of your life, had zero issues with confidence, and maybe even maybe there's some feel a little arrogant at times. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah. Yeah. And I, especially when it came to professionally, in sports, confidence is a huge piece, and it made me a real successful, player and so on. And I had learned and studied a lot about confidence and as an athlete and kind of what you had to do. And that translated professionally, and it was kind of the same thing. We started off really slow with some struggles in Atlanta. We moved to Portland and kind of fought the fight for a couple of years. And then all of a sudden, everything seemed to turn around. And, I went from making a handful of money to 6 digits. It seemed like overnight, and our whole lifestyle changed. And so I think that gave me a little bit of, I don't know if false security is the right word, but a little bit of extra confidence. I'm like, hey, I'm going to be real successful in life. I'm young, and especially when it came from the transition of getting out of corporate America and going on to work for myself. I think that confidence or arrogance kind of pushed a little faster than it should have, because I left a really great situation. And at the time I thought it was a really bad situation, but looking back, it was really a great situation. I was in finance, great income, great schedule, everything one could ask. But again, on that note being said, I had a dream I wanted to chase.
Sure.
And since I was a young kid, I wanted to be an entrepreneur. I wanted to be self-made. And so I had to at least go try. And I was confident enough to go do that. And I had the support of my wife and family. And so I took that step forward, and off we went.
Cool. All right. And then what happened?
So then, like I said, early in the self-employment game, things are working great. And quickly, the real estate market just did what it did. This is 2009-ish. It completely crashed. And our business model at the time was built a lot on leverage. Borrow more from homes and to buy more, borrow more to buy. And when, without kind of giving an economic speech, when the ability to leverage and borrow stopped, it crumbled the business. And when the real estate values just started to sink, it not only crumbled, but it just destroyed everything. So at the time, not really realizing that the market was going to take the severe beating that it did, I just kept pulling money from any savings and retirement and equity we could get to continue to float these real estate deals, thinking, oh, we'll bounce back out of this. And it never did. And like I said, when I talk to, when I communicate with my wife, a little poorly sometimes, especially back then, I can remember sitting down with her at the table and saying, we have about 2 weeks left of money. And I've just been feeding these properties thousands of dollars a month to keep them alive. And it's over, basically. And she, still to this day, will talk about that event. That was very much a life-changing event. I learned a lot about myself and communication with my spouse, to be honest, about something like that. I mean, that was really, it happened so fast, but probably we had this trajectory of about 3 or 4 months where I could kind of start to foresee, like, if this continues, we're going to really be in some trouble. But again, I just kind of kept, I'm okay. It's, kind of let that arrogance, we'll be fine. I'll just keep this thing afloat, and then we'll be in good shape. And that just wasn't the case. And it was, here we are with pennies left in the bank. And I finally decide, well, I better tell my wife about this. And
so it sounds
that
like
was a very tough conversation.
One of the ways that you're wired, or you have been wired, is you have these conversations in your own head. You're thinking through things. It's not like you're just blindly going through life. You have these great probably debates and seeing the good and the bad, and like, what should I do? All that's happening in your head.
Yeah.
and your wife is not privy to these conversations in your head, and she's just
No.
thinking everything's just going along like clockwork, and
Yeah.
then all of a sudden, for in her world, it probably seems like, oh, this is all of the sudden, where for you, you're like, oh, this is like been going on for a while. It took us a while to get here, and here we are. We got 2 weeks left. For you, it feels like, oh, I just finally came to that conclusion. For her, it's like you sprung it on her.
Yeah.
So I can imagine some people can relate. So right now we're going through another. I mean, I went through that exact same scenario as you did back then, but there's people right now listening that maybe this is their first time going through the economic struggle with
Yeah.
business, and married. And if you could go back, is as far as the marriage goes, as far as the communication goes, like, what would you, if anything, have done differently back then, just in case somebody's in that spot now?
I think that, especially concerning the marriage aspect of it, I think having a real streamlined communication process, especially during struggle. What I know is when things were going good and things are going great, you don't really talk about the day-to-day things in the business or the day-to-day things personally. But when things started to turn, it's easy, especially as men, because we're just kind of naturally, a lot of us, confident and I don't want to say egotistical, but just kind of problem solvers ourselves. And like me at that time, I mean, this was going on in my head on and on for months. And it was the same thing when I left finance to go be self-employed. This was a process I was thinking about for months and months. So just like you mentioned, when I finally, basically throw it in my wife's face here at the last minute, I've actually been processing this for months on end. And that's, I think, where I made my biggest mistake, if not just kind of saying, hey, she had a good understanding that the market was turning and things, but I don't think there wasn't a really good understanding, and that was due to my lack of communication with her, of just how bad of a position our company was headed down.
Mm-hmm.
And I think if I would have done a better job just communicating, hey, there's some things on the horizon that are not looking good. And whether we'd start to discuss some changes we need to make in our household or whatever it may be, but I just think that would have softened the blow, or at least given some advance warning from not, hey, we got 2 weeks left to live, and other than that, we're going to need to start asking mom and dad for money or something like that, versus, where maybe we could have, and I could have gotten her input too a lot better several months in advance, like, hey, we are headed to a real rocky road in several months. But again, I just kept thinking, oh, this will turn. I've got this. And I've always kind of been the type of guy, even, that I'll just put it on my shoulders. I got this. And that did definitely cause some strain and some conflict in our relationship. Because when I left to go self-employed, it was kind of the same thing, Scott. I just kind of let her know, hey, I think I'm ready to do this. And she just, oh, okay, yeah, I believe in you, and go. But it wasn't really a big discussion. And that's something, looking back, I definitely wish I would have opened those communication channels a lot more. And it would have saved us both some headaches. Absolutely.
Sure. Yeah. And obviously hindsight's 2020, and we get older and wiser. We take scrapes and learn from them. But so I'm curious to, why do you think, like, obviously, if you could relive it, you may have communicated sooner, more often, had a more open communication channel, but why do you think you didn't? I know you mentioned you felt confident, you felt self-reliant, but was there anything else? Like, was there a fear? Was there anything else besides just like, oh, I'm a Lone Ranger, I don't need anybody, I can do this? Was there anything else going on there?
Yeah, there definitely was a lot of fear. And it's interesting. I've reflected on that question a lot, about what was I afraid of? And I think it kind of goes two ways. Now, I wasn't afraid of my wife looking at me in a way indifferent, looking at me as failure or couldn't accomplish something. I wasn't worried about that at all.
Mm-hmm.
I think the bigger problem was me being able to admit that myself, being able to look at myself and say, this didn't work out. This didn't.
So you were kind of in denial in a way, and that would have made you would have to acknowledge it.
Yeah. And it was, because again, I had never gone through failure really. You always have little setbacks here and there, but never professionally or family wise or anything had I experienced kind of failure. And so, I guess for lack of a better term, I just kept lying to myself through the process. And by lying to myself through that process of the real estate thing falling apart, I had convinced myself, well, I don't need to tell my wife about this because it'll be okay. I'll figure it out. But again, that real estate crash was clearly like nothing we've ever seen before. And it happened so fast. But again, looking back, like I mentioned, opening the lines of communication through that struggle would not have changed the outcome of what happened professionally, but it definitely would have changed the trajectory of my marriage and what ultimately led to substantial amount of years of frustration and anger. And still to this day, will be reminded about, like I have to be reminded, or God bless my wife, she will have to remind me, hey, don't just spring on me that you're going to go do this. Again, me being kind of the self guy, like, hey, I'm thinking about doing this. I'm like, well, have you been thinking about it for 4 months, or did you just think about this 2 hours ago? You know what I mean? So,
yeah.
So really just opening up those channels of communication, because one thing I didn't realize then is kind of the lasting effect on a negative perspective that was really going to cause for years after the fact, especially going through the hardships that we did. And I'll share a little bit more, but it really complicated because naturally my wife started to kind of create a little distance about, am I going to hear about things last minute? Am I going to, where am I in this relationship? And it just wasn't very fair to her. That's for sure.
It left her with probably a lack of confidence, a lack of certainty that she could really trust you, like to know what's really going on. That probably kind of made all that happen for her. Is that right?
Absolutely. And she handled it as great as anybody could. But there definitely was a ton of frustration. And at the time, I didn't really understand it because she was a stay-at-home mom. And, again, you kind of talked about, a little bit, I was a little bit arrogant. Oh, I'll figure it out. It'll be fine. And then, oh, she's not really involved in the business anyway. I don't really need to share these kind of things. But that
you
was
kind of
just
saw
the
yourselves in
approach.
two different lanes.
Yeah. And it was the absolute wrong approach I took. 100%.
Okay. So we'll come back to and maybe that's where, we might end up, you mentioned a couple of times having open lines of communication. And so I want to get to okay, lessons learned, here's how we do it today, these days, but go ahead. And before we do that, go ahead and fill in the rest of the story. And what happened next. And I understand, we haven't hit rock bottom yet, right?
Not even close.
Okay. So let's get there. What was that?
Yeah. So our business starts to fail, and it seemed like overnight. And so, long story short, we lose everything. I have completely liquidated every asset and every bank account we have. And we end up losing our house and our cars, you name it. I mean, full blown financial collapse. We end up moving from, like I said, our nice house on the hill into just a rented townhome. I'm trying to find odd jobs here and there just to keep things afloat. And And during this time, I'm really struggling personally just with failure. You know, I had, like I said, I had not really experienced it before. And mentally, we're normally in the past, I think because the failure or the setbacks were so minor, I was able really just to kind of put my head down and go. But this was so substantial that it was kind of dream crushing in a way. And mentally, I just couldn't grasp it. So I didn't have that fight in me. And that was new to me because I'm a bit of a fighter, and I just did not have that in me. And so the struggles continued financially. I got, some other jobs that weren't nearly what they were before. And I'm starting to get sued, and I'm starting to get foreclosure notices on all our rentals. And it just is a continuously daily reminder of that failure. And it's sinking me further and further kind of into some dark spaces. So I get back into finance for a little while. Again, in the business of financial advisory, I'm having to start from scratch. So it's not like I got a chance to just go back to my high paying position. I got to start all over. And that's just not working as well. And I'm starting to realize that, in finance and dealing with clients and things like that, I'm starting to lose my confidence in me as a professional. I'm starting to wonder, Guy, maybe I'm not as good as I thought I was in this aspect in business, and maybe trying to be self-employed was bad, and on and on and on. And as I'm starting to kind of get into this just darker and darker place that I can't get out of, I start to find myself doing things that were not who I was. I was so desperate to pull myself away from my reality at that point that I started doing things that weren't who I was as a person. I start drinking a little more, start doing things that a married family man shouldn't be doing. I start going out and just going down a road to remove myself from this situation. And that's just creating more and more distance from my wife, my family, my friends, and all of that. And I'm really starting to head down kind of an ugly road personally. And there's always this glimmer in the back of my mind, kind of like, hey, you're going to be okay. We'll pull out of this. But again, I would go home and I would feel my wife's angst and anxiety about our situation. And I would just want to leave. I just wouldn't want to be a part of that reality. And I'd want to go find something else to just get me away from these realities in my life. So, most people like, okay, so we're really starting to get depressed. We're really starting to feel really badly about how things are going. And a lot of people would say that was rock bottom, if you will. But then we take another chapter, and I'm sitting on my couch, and the door knocks, and I go open the door, and it's two FBI agents. Oh, wow. And I'm like, this is interesting. And so assuming, who knows, no idea what they're there for. And I get this, you need to come down to our offices in the morning, and you need to discuss with us the loan application that was that basically a business partner of mine had done regarding a property. So when I was in real estate, I had multiple partnerships through some of these deals. And a couple of my partners on a particular deal that we did do, we had a loan application, we refinanced the property. So on a loan application. So no idea what it even was. Still at this point, I'm just like, okay, that's weird. And so I go to sleep, not thinking anything of it. And I'm still more worried about just kind of overcoming the failure side of things. And I go into the FBI office the next day, again, not thinking anything. And it was crazy, Scott. I can only, like, anything you ever see with like interrogations, it's like so much worse in real life. So, I mean, I sit in this little room that must be 6 feet by 6 feet. There's like a picture of Osama bin Laden and FBI's top 10 behind me. And wow. I'm just, I'm just like, what are we doing here? What loan are we talking about? Anyway, I get these two FBI agents. There we are. Are we back?
Yep. All right.
Okay.
So you were just about to say these two FBI agents.
So these two FBI agents for 4 hours just lay it on me that I falsified documents in order to get a loan for a house, and that me and my partners, and my two partners were also my two best friends. One I had known since I was 10 years old. Wow. And I mean, just it's unlike any scene I've even seen in a movie. I mean, it was really, really something else. So I remember after the 4 hours of just nailing it down, I walk outside and I literally just bend over in a corner and just throw up everywhere. I'm just so shaken up by what just happened. So not only now was I facing, you know, the what I had just described, as I'm starting to actually kind of sink into a depression, if you will, over what has happened to the course in the last couple of years. But now that is thrown on top of me. Mm-hmm. And so again, I leave that meeting not knowing what's going to happen. And I'm just like, I mean, I remember leaving and like, am I under arrest? Am I going to prison? What happens here? I'm still no idea no idea really what the situation is. And
it was one of those things where they just like, oh, we'll be in touch. Something like that, right?
Yep. Yeah. It ended a little more oddly than like, okay, see ya. And I'm like, see ya? What is that? You know, that it was so weird. Mm-hmm. So I don't hear anything for about 2 or 3 months, and I'm still struggling personally, you know, just trying to get back on my feet. But every single day, not only is my realization of kind of what my reality is, but now I've kind of got this lingering, man, is what's going to happen with this financial thing? Mm-hmm. So about 3-4 months goes by, my phone rings, and I just get this, hey, this is agent so-and-so, where are you at? And I was doing some work for another friend of mine, and I was just, I'm located here. 5 minutes, they're right there. I come down to the parking lot, and they serve me an indictment for false statements to a bank, and bank fraud and wire fraud and all these other things. So, you know, I'll make this story as, you know, as short as I can. So needless to say, you know, going through that process, I get a court-appointed attorney and finally figure out, okay, what this is all about. And what had happened on the loan application that was actually in my partner's name. It was not in my name. No information of mine was ever given. Had a false note. The income that he stated was higher than what his actual income was. Mm-hmm. And that was the false statement and bank fraud charges. So get a court-appointed attorney on, you know, needless to say, we go through months and months and months and are preparing for trial because, again, and, you know, without getting all to the crazy details, it was just something I didn't do. It's not, it was not my loan. It was not even a statement that I would have been able to give someone else's income, but we got charged, all three. It wasn't just me, it was the partnership basically in general. Sure. And
so go ahead and fast forward to the result of all that. Cause yeah, I mean,
so the result basically is, so after months of this debate and getting set to go to trial, my attorney sits me down and he says, you know, I just saw a trial that was very similar to what you would be going through. And I was 100% positive the jury was going to come back not guilty. And they came back guilty.
Wow.
And he goes, I think we should start talking. Your attorney. Oh, I think we should talk about a plea. And I just couldn't really face that reality.
Yeah.
So then I basically had a couple of weeks to really think about and I talked to some advisors I knew and some people I knew about what to do. And it was like, if you go to trial and lose, here I am, the sole income provider of my family, and lose. I mean, I could actually be ripped away from my family, 2 young kids, and go to prison.
Sure.
And what had happened in this case also is my 2 business partners, also my best friends at the time, both were advised and took the path of pointing the finger all at me, because I came from a finance background. I had securities licensing, and they both were, oh, this is all on Dave. It's all on Dave. Sure. It's all on. So anyway, I ended up accepting a plea because I couldn't take the risk. And that, like I said in the bio you read, it really changed my trajectory in life. It really changed everything about who I was. I had any of my security licensing stripped away. I had all of that gone. And so now not only was I faced with kind of this depression from this failure I was going through, but I had this monumental life event happen that changed my course and continues to be a major player in my life, if you will, even today. And I sunk to rock bottom. That is straight rock bottom. I mean, so I remember staying
that whole time from the FBI knocking on your door till it was concluded with what's the right term, plea on it?
A plea, yep.
So how many months was that time period?
That's probably just over a year. Yeah, okay. It's between a year and 2 years.
Okay, so during that time, what was the communication like with your wife? Like, had you learned the lessons yet, or were you still
no
Lone Ranger?
I was so withdrawn at that point. I just wanted to do everything to just continue to change the reality of my life.
Yeah, you were numbing out. You were doing all sorts of stuff that wasn't congruent with who you are. Just anything you could do to avoid the facing reality. That's sort of your existence during that time. Okay. And so what was do you know, I mean, maybe you don't, maybe it's a dark spot in your memory, but you probably know, like, from conversations, like, what was your wife going through at that time?
You know, a lot of the same things I was, really? You know, because we had been together so long, and she really was great at, you know, basically where she really felt the same kind of pain, and seeing the kind of pain I was in, and the kind of the state of hopelessness. You know, I had lost everything. Then the FBI, now I've lost my 2 best friends. My marriage was falling apart. She had kind of a mix of understanding, of course, but at the same time, a lot of anger, because I was not addressing it with her.
Where was she getting her support?
You know, through some friends and family, I think.
Okay.
She has some very supportive family members that I think just continued to help her, and thankfully just taught and preached patience. Be patient, be patient, be patient.
Yeah. Thank God.
And so, so that was a lot. And she has said after the fact that one thing that she felt God was always telling her was just love him, despite just love him, was like a constant reminder. And that message alone probably saved our marriage, because if I was in her shoes, I would have packed up and said, we'll see you later. Because I was going down a really bad road, and had been for a number of years at this point. And I got to the point where, you know, like I said, I was, you know, I stopped showing up for work. I just wanted to sleep, stay in bed. And again, you know, you go through periods through depression. And I remember before ever going through anything like this, thinking to myself, I don't understand how someone could fall into a depression or take their own life or anything like that. I just never really, guys, it seems so selfish to do something like that. But I mean, I was scratching that surface. And I mean, there was days when you start to kind of get in your head that people are better off without you. And you start thinking that way, how much better life would be for others if I wasn't around. And it just leads to some awfully dangerous perspective and depression. And I just remember after about 3-4 days of another, I didn't want to leave the house, leave me alone, type of deal, I came to the decision and I said, I've got to decide here if I either need to move on at this point, because we're talking years have passed at this point, or I've got to change it. I've either got to move on and I've got to move forward, or I've got to, I hate to say it, I've got to end this. And by end this, I mean in me. And I sat up at the end of my bed and I said, let's move forward. And that's enough. And whatever it takes, if I got to go get counseling, whatever I got to do, let's move forward. And so that's what I did. And I just slowly stood up and kind of got myself together, started charting out a path of here's how I'm going to try to bounce back from this. And both mentally and professionally, as a husband, as a father, as a friend, and just the changes that I was going to have to make moving forward.
So you said chart out a path. I mean, in your mind, like, did you write stuff down? Did you get some goal sheets out? Like, what was the process for that?
So I started off by just a yellow pad, and I started off by writing where I wanted to be a year from now. And
what got you to that question? That's such a good, powerful question in that moment, but what got you there?
What I didn't want to do is I didn't want to set something out. And now after going through and really learning about kind of how the mind works and how goals should be set, I didn't want to set anything that was too long-term or really intangible. It is really easy, even a year sometimes with a lot of clients I work with is too far. But for me, I was in such a negative place. I had to have some distance to look forward to.
Enough runway.
I had to. I couldn't say, what do I want to accomplish by Friday? Because if two of the if two of the 5 things didn't work out, I knew that would really spiral me again. I said, okay, so where do I want to be in a year? And I start to bullet point, hey, here's where I want to be. And then I just start backing down. To get there, I've got to do this on a daily basis, this on a monthly basis, and so on and so on. And I really just cram it down into ultra short-term goals. So I could see as many wins as possible all the time. That was really the key to turning, to turning the corner. And I knew deep down that small wins and successes would kind of turn my confidence around pretty quick. I don't want to say I said that wrong, not pretty quick, but at least we'd get on that path to start turning it.
Right.
Because Scott, I'm telling you, so I'm starting to get into construction at this time, and it's unbearable. My confidence, like I can't have very good professional conversations because I'm just scared. I'm fear of failure. What if I don't get this job? The biggest fear I had was, what if they figure out that I'm a felon? What are they going to think of me? How are they going to judge me? They're not going to trust me. And I mean, that was a huge part of it. And so in order to overcome these, I kind of call it in my program a rediscovery phase. I had to really sit down and rediscover who I was and what I wanted. And really chart it out and realize that, okay, can I accomplish these things? Can I get through and do these things? And the answer was, I don't know, but we're sure going to try. And that was a huge, powerful tool. And I looked at it every day, amongst some other things, every day, just reminded. And I always just gave myself small wins every day. Hey, I'm going to make a few phone calls to whatever it was, small little, I'm going to take my wife to dinner 3 times this week. These small little wins like that. Even if we're going to sit across the table and not say a word to each other because we're so stressed out, that's still a win. And just piling little wins, and they lead to much better things.
Sure. So it started out with the yellow pad and the question, where do I want to be a year from now? And then bring it down to daily wins. What can I commit to? What can I know I can do Like I don't have control of everything, but I know I could do this. And if I do that, I check it off and I'm making progress.
Yeah,
That's
exactly.
good.
And
So
yeah, and
go ahead.
go ahead.
No,
No, I
you're
was
good.
going to say, and then after that, really, um, the most powerful tool that I used through that process, especially when it came to my confidence, I had realized that everything that I had kind of believed about friendship, about business, had really changed. It all got flipped upside down.
Wow.
And like I was talking about in meetings where my confidence was shook and I just wasn't myself. I'm a pretty outgoing kind of, I can talk and be a decent salesman and things like that, but that was gone. I found myself much more quiet and reserved. And what I had to do is I kind of had to reinvent who I was. And a lot of people think this reinvention, reinvent myself as a human being. It really wasn't that. It was really reinvent certain aspects of my life that I had these weaknesses in now. So I had to get my confidence back from a presentation standpoint. And so I had to kind of reinvent who I was now in that. And so I went through this process. I started to study really fascinating articles about alter egos. And that's used a lot in sports. And I remember I even used it in sports. So I started to kind of circle back to some of that stuff. And I basically, for lack of a better term, started to create some characters that the creative imagination is a really powerful tool when it comes to being somebody and showing up as something you need to be. And so I started to really buy into these philosophies, and it completely changed everything about me, and how I presented and how I handled my business, how I handled my marriage, so on, so on. Okay. And it was a really fun activity. Okay. Now it's time to be dad. I can't be kind of, this, like you said, the little thing. I can't be this goal-driven guy that's got to bounce back from this. I got to be dad right now.
Yeah.
So I've got to take the attributes that I've created of what it means to be a father and a dad, and I got to be that. I got to show up 100% as that. And so tools like that really, really help turn my life around, from being now this scarred, very damaged individual, very hurt and scorned person, into opening back up and rediscovering strengths that I didn't even know I had, and being able to really start to push forward through that adversity. It was a huge, huge tool to help me through that process.
A mentor of mine once said that the place of your greatest pain is the place of your greatest reign, meaning that once you've gone through that, you have authority to, you've conquered it one time, you can conquer it again, you can help other people get through it. And so that's sort of where your professional passion for coaching has come to, and you're helping men. So that thing that got you out of it, the notepad and the good question, and then the daily wins, has it transferred to, have you been able to help people who've been in that rock bottom place? Like, what's that look like now?
Yeah, absolutely. So I've been fortunate, I have kind of, picking up my life and kind of getting back on our feet financially and emotionally and all that, taking that, it took a little while, about some self-discovery, to realize that, that what I went through is not very common. And I started to realize, instead of feeling sorry for myself or angry about myself, I started to think, how can I use what I went through to help others? How can I, because it's quite a unique story. And it's quite, especially when you throw in the legal aspect of it. It's quite an unbelievable event. And so what I did is I just started kind of talking to people about it, with real no plan of kind of being a coach or whatever, if you will, but just kind of, hey, here's what happened to me, and here's kind of what some of the things I did to get through it. And hey, I wouldn't mind talking to you a little bit about, I'm going through this struggle. And so friends that I had, whether going through divorce, whatever it may have been, professional setbacks, any kind of adversity, even stuff that was they felt was affecting them from their childhood. Just like, hey, what kind of things you recommend can be done to get me through this? And then it's kind of from that. So, years of kind of just doing that, it's kind of blossomed into where I became speaking about it. I've got a couple different presentations that I give. One is in particular coaching the men. The other is just a speech that's called "My Name Is Not Felon," which is about kind of your identity and who you are as a person and so on, and overcoming labels like that. And it's really, I've been beyond blessed to be able to share. I try to share it with as many people as I can and realize that there is a hope to get out of the adversity you may face in. And I really targeted men specifically because I think as men, we have a habit of holding things in and kind of the conquer the world type of attitude, a lot of us, like I did. And I've got this, I don't need help, or I'll figure it out. When all you need is sometimes a little pat on the back or whatever guidance to kind of get you through some of those to really change. And like I said, just small little things to really change the trajectory of something you're struggling with. And so that's been my passion for several years now. And again, I just try to continue to grow my message the best I can to help as many people as I can.
Yeah, it's interesting. By the way, are you okay if we take an extra 5 or so minutes here? Or do you have anything? Okay.
No, I'm good.
It's interesting that what I expected to talk to you about today was maybe something more professional, more personal development stuff. But what I feel like this is more about is a marriage focused podcast, and I want to. So we'll probably have to have you back again to talk about some of those things that you talk about normally from a stage and capture that piece because it's very inspirational. But for now, I want to wrap it up with this theme that's kind of been throughout your story of the marriage and the communication. So now, being the older, wiser, more battle-tested, experienced version of you, what's the advice? Because, there's business owners listening to this right now who are married and are avoiding, fearful. The conversations with the spouse are difficult, and you're worried about worrying them. And there's so many things. But I think, as you have already mentioned, there's the stuff's going to be the stuff. And the communication channel being open is, while maybe not easy, it's important. So how do you handle that nowadays? How do you keep that channel open? What's the advice there?
I think from changing my perspective from more of an approach of we versus me, of having the dialogue like that when something isn't going right, kind of making sure we have that dialogue early, whether it's something that's totally independent on my end, or something that maybe is say in our marriage or something to do with our family or something like that, is just really not thinking I'll figure it out attitude. Oh, it'll go away attitude, but actually talking and communicating through that. And it's not an easy process, especially, I came out of what I went through, like I said, really scarred and really hardened. And through that process and that depression of really wanting to just bottle up everything inside, I realized it just was not fair to my wife, and it was not fair to me to hold that all in. And I actually was realizing when I looked back, as I'm sure most listeners will, that when has there been a time where you've come out in a good situation for holding back a bunch of stuff? Like, I can't think of really any time in my life where, man, I'm glad I really never talked about this, because just me bottling it up inside really worked out great. That never seems to work out. I can't think, I really just internalized it and it all worked out great. I can't think of any time I've had anybody ever give me that message.
Thank God I never shared that with anyone. That so helped me.
Yeah. Oh, I'm so glad I just kept it, buried it inside for all those. And it's just not a healthy way. It's not healthy individually. It's not healthy with a spouse or a partner or family member or a kid. It's just not healthy. And what it does is it, you know, especially in my particular story, it just backfires. And it just backfires. And it leads to more issues. It leads to more problems. And I remember my basketball coach in Florida mentioned years later, I talked about what, in his opinion, was the greatest description of a leader. If there was one word, what would be the greatest, what would be that word that would define a leader? And he said communication. And I kind of sat back there and looked, I go, you know what? And this was after I had gone through all this already. Like, you know what? He's absolutely right. Like, if I would have just communicated with my wife at the time of all this starting to go downhill, look at how my life would have changed. If I would have been honest with myself, or even communicated to a friend what my struggle, look at how things would have changed. The whole trajectory of that, my marriage went down, and it would have changed 100% just by communicating. And so if there's anything I can share about that, it is way more important than you can even imagine, just to have that open dialogue. And as much as you might think it's going to lead to disappointment, it's going to lead to a potential fight or lead to issues. There is I can promise you it will not lead to issues than stuffing it all and holding it all inside, because that's the big issue. And again, it just builds and builds and builds if you're not able to effectively kind of go down that road of communication.
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, I've talked to enough married people, men and women, to know that, you know, sometimes, you know, as much as that makes sense, what you're saying, it's still like, I don't know how, like, I don't know what to do. You know, and if you're listening and you're here and you're in that place, you know, reach out to Dave or me. Either one of us would love to help you talk through that. And I also, I mean, we just did an episode on it a few episodes ago with Andy and Keisha, talking about connection sessions and the importance of them. You know, I have a free resource to help you communicate, and it's awakenlife.com/connection-session. I'll link that in the show notes, but it's a free resource and it's a powerful tool. Sometimes the things that, you know, work the best, they're not that complicated, but they're very difficult, right? It's not complicated. It's also not easy. It's challenging, but you know, you download this sheet and, you know, it's not, it'll help. And like I said, we'll put Dave's contact information in. I know he would love to help you have that conversation if you need to. I would as well. And Dave, also, you know, working specifically with men who are in these mindsets that are most challenging, that if there's someone listening, that definitely is I would refer that person to you if they're struggling in that deepest, darkest place. I don't have that same experience. And what help do you have for them? How can they get a hold of you on that?
Well, they can get a hold of me through my website anytime, which is called theempowered.life. You can learn a bit more about me, as well as get in touch with me if you need anything. And, you know, one of the things that I always talk about, especially during kind of the reinvention phase of an individual, is that there's lots of times where it's something so small that's holding you back, whether it's professional, whether it's in marriage, whether it can be relationship based. It's something so small that you just need a small tweak in. It's funny. Again, I don't want to be too long-winded. I know we're at a time constraint, but lots of times when dealing with quote unquote therapy, which I'm not a therapist by any stretch, but you see a lot of try to like completely restructure the way you're thinking and hey, things that when you were 6 years old that happened, we need a lot of that stuff that is so far deep that you don't really need to go down that rabbit hole to really see substantial change in your life. You just need a small tweak of a couple of different things. And that's what I've been trying to share most. And again, it's something I've got a passion to do. And I really, really, feel that there's a calling to do it, because there's a lot of us that have gone through some adversity, some not so big in comparison to my crazy story, but it's just as vital in their life as it was in mine.
Yeah. Well, Coach Dave, thank you for being on the show. Like for me, a leader, a good word for leader besides communication would just be, I would add an adjective, vulnerable communication, being vulnerable, showing that vulnerability. That's what you've done here today. I think that inspires. I think that shows leadership. And so I appreciate you showing up and telling that story. And it's not an easy thing, but you do it well, and I appreciate it and I honor you for it. I think my hope is always with this podcast that it might inspire or help at least one person every episode. And so I'm confident we've done that today, and I appreciate your contribution. Anything else you want to leave people with before I let you go?
No, thank you so much for having me on. And it's been an absolute pleasure. And like I said, if hopefully this, what we've shared today can speak to one person, if not more, and start to turn the corner.
Thanks for listening to the Awakened Life podcast. I've been your host, Scott Landis. Hey, are you feeling overwhelmed and stressed out? It could be that you're out of balance or have a misalignment of your time and priorities. This month at Awakened Life Academy, we're featuring the Total Freedom Life Wheel exercise designed to help you uncover what might be off balance in your work, life, and other priorities. And then it helps you realign your priorities to your purpose. Check out the full training video and free download at wheel.awakenlife.com. That's wheel.awakenedlife.com for free access. Don't put this personal growth opportunity off. Go get it now and start to experience the freedom that balance can bring to your life. Go to wheel.awakenlife.com.